mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And thank you for being patient. I know we started a few minutes late, but we wanted to have time for everyone to join us. My name is Laura Arrington. I work here at Starbridge, and I coordinate not only the federal Parent Training Information Center grant, but also the New York State Parent Center grant. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Bernie.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Bernie Tracy, and I will be your presenter this afternoon. I am the coordinator of special education mediation for the New York State Dispute Resolution Association under contract with the New York State Department of Education.
Thank you so much. I have a few little housekeeping notes before we start the presentation. I'm going to show you how to use your questions pane. And what we're going to have at the end of the presentation is Dr. Bernie's going to actually go to webcam, and you will type in your questions, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment, and then you'll see her answer those questions as well. I want you to know that there'll be a follow-up email along with a link to SurveyMonkey with a brief feedback, and you'll have access to the materials today. So I wanted to show you there's a little button up here, this little orange button that allows you to expand and collapse your control panel. So as the presentation goes, if you find it's in your way, feel free to click on that and it will collapse that. If you expand it and you see the button, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the audio. If for some reason you're having trouble hearing or you have headphones or it's not coming through your computer, you can switch over to the telephone button and it will give you a number and a PIN number to call in. As well as it will also open up a questions pane. If you click on questions, it'll click open that questions pane, and then it will also allow you to type a question that we will again take at the end. So we do have a few polling questions here. We just like to get to know our audience a little bit better. And so the first question we'd like to show you is who is joining us today? So today we're asking if you are a parent of a child, an individual with a disability, or if you are a human service provider or other, if that didn't meet any of those categories. And it looks like they're still coming in a little bit. Okay, it looks like we're all set. This is interesting. Oh, no, wait, a few more. Okay, 100% have voted. So let's take a look at those results. We're going to share those results with you. And so it looks like we have 40% are human service providers, 60% are others. So thank you so much for providing us with that information. So the other question that we want just to know a little bit more about you as well is the age of either your children or the people that you work with. And we have 0 to 8, we have 9 through 14, 15 to 21, and over 21. And it looks like about 80% have voted. Okay, it looks like everyone's votes in. And we're going to share those results with you. It's very interesting. We have 40% 0 to 8, 60% 9 through 14, 40% 15 to 21, and 80% over 21 years of age. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. So I'm going to get ready to turn this over to Dr. Bernadette Tracy, and she will share all the great knowledge that she has with mediation today. So in just a moment, Dr. Bernie, you should see a button to click on Share Your Screen, and then you can begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're seeing my screen all right. Welcome to the Special Ed Mediation webinar. Mediation empowers parents, teachers, and kids. It helps you to get past no. That's the power. Very often we get stuck, especially when we've been dealing with a problem over and over again. And then we get stuck in a position, and we are determined that we're just going to get what we want. And very often when that happens, it really hides the true interest we have underneath. And the people we're dealing with often do the same type of thing. When we get to that position, we can't hear each other. And what mediation does is it gives us the power to begin to listen again and to find the places where we agree. Conflict can be positive or negative. Tell me, how do you think about conflict? Do you think about it as a positive, or do you usually think about it as a negative? Well, the truth is, if you think of it as a negative, and most of us do, it means that the course of actions we take usually have negative outcomes. So mediation gives us a chance to level the negotiation playing field. It gives us a chance to sit back again and regain our ability to think reasonably about what the true issues underneath the position that we've established is. And we should use mediation when the following things happen to us. We have a problem, and it is repeating or it's escalating. I've been there. I spoke to them again. They're still saying they're not listening to me, and now I am getting hot underneath the collar. That is a point when we should begin thinking about, we need some help. We need to think about mediation. If the conflict is entrenched, it's just there. It's part of the system. It's complex. But something has to give in order for my child to get what they need. So, again, it's a time to think. This is a time I need help. Why not mediation? Very often when we get dug in, we have personal relationships that are threatened seriously. It's a very hard thing to deal with a toxic environment, especially when it involves children. We need the air to be clear. We need to be able to talk civilly and compassionately with the people who are dealing with our kids. And so whenever we get to that feeling like I can't stand, every time I look at that person I get a headache. That never happens to you, I'm sure. But if it should, that would be a time to think about mediation, because it causes stress. And what happens when we're under stress? Again, we can't think straight. Now just think about this. When you dig in, your position that you're dug in on, it either prevents or limits your ability to listen, and most importantly, to discover the places where you and the people you're dealing with agree. Because one of the wonderful things about special education mediation is we're talking about kids. And in this case, we're talking about kids all the way from the age of 0 to 21, and then we have some adults that we're dealing with. So it becomes so critical. And if we're in the business of helping children and adults with disabilities, then we do know that we have one place of common interest. And if we can listen to each other, we'll find many more. Now, the mediator, who would be the individual who, when you say, let's think about mediation, this individual is an outside expert in conflict management. And the job is to just help you to listen, to help you to talk about what the difficulties are, to offer alternate solutions or proposed solutions or ways in which we can make this situation better. And if you find some common ground, then you may result in a binding agreement. And that's a wonderful thing about, again, special education mediation. If you do succeed in finding agreement, the agreement you make is legally binding. Some principles that drive mediation are that mediation is voluntary. You request it, and I will give you a link where it would show you how you request it. And when you do, you present it to the Board of Education or your Committee on Special Education. And because they are bound to be in a position to help, their response is a voluntary response to join you in mediation. Mediation is impartial. What does that mean? The mediator does not take sides. The mediator does not make judgments. The mediator is not concerned about who is right and who is wrong. The mediator only has one view. That is to help both parties effectively communicate with each other to resolve an issue that can mean the difference between a child having a fair and appropriate public education or not. The mediation environment is safe. It's safe because everything that happens in mediation is confidential. Anything that's said in mediation, however it's said, stays within that room. The information of what the side or extraneous conversations that led to the agreement are not in any way reported. In fact, when the mediation is over, the mediator will ask everyone to pass in any notes that they took during the mediation so that those notes can be destroyed. The only thing that will leave the mediation room will be, if successful and an agreement is made, the mediator will write it up, and the only thing that will leave that room will be the signed agreement between the parent, the director, who's representing the school district, and the mediator. Those are the required signatures on a mediation agreement. The mediator cannot be summoned to testify in any subsequent proceeding. And so you're safe and you're free to speak your mind. Another quality of mediation is that it's very timely. If you're a parent or you, a school district person, thinks that mediation can be helpful to you, from the time that the request is made to one of the centers for dispute resolution that are members of the New York State Dispute Resolution Association, the organization for which I work, and the organization that has the contract with the New York Department of Education. From the time one of those centers that are spread regionally across the state receives a request, that mediation will be scheduled within 5 to 14 days. A little later on, I will show you a map of where those centers are located and provide you a way in which you can be in touch with them. Another great benefit is that there's no cost to mediation. No cost to the parent, no cost to the school district, because the costs are the responsibility of New York State Department of Ed. So in all, what we're saying is mediation is empowering. It gives you the chance to make your own decisions, to be in control, to not resort too early to a due process procedure that basically puts the decision-making in the hands of another person. By stopping and finding the most early and most appropriate point to request mediation, you give yourself the power to stay and to determine the destiny of your child or the children that you're advocating for. So a summary of the benefits. One, it improves communication. Most of the time we find in mediation that people just have not either listened to each other, or information has been misinterpreted, or in many instances, information has not even been shared. And so there's a lack of information. And once the misinterpretations are cleared up, and once the information that wasn't available before happens, people just see things in a different mode and almost immediately begin to relax more and to find a better way of being able to relate to the person on the other side of the table. It addresses underlying issues. So it doesn't just scratch the surface. It doesn't just say, okay, well, we're going to do this placement, and okay, so we've agreed to that, and we walk out the door with a placement, but still many unresolved issues. We ask the person who has requested the mediation, usually a parent, to just have the floor at the beginning of mediation to talk about everything that has happened and all of the concerns that they have about what's going on with their child. And then that way, the underlying issues surface. The parties control the outcome. As I said, it's only the agreement that you like, and it's only the things that the two parties find to be mutually agreeable and satisfying and in the best interest of the child, and they come to an agreement. It doesn't impede, however, a parent's right to pursue an impartial hearing, which is the due process procedure available to all parents. So if you look at those things, it basically says it takes away nothing in terms of rights, and it provides every opportunity to resolve a burning issue that is affecting the life of a child or an adult with a disability. Now we need to talk about what issues can be mediated versus what issues cannot be mediated. So generally speaking, we can clearly say that anything that deals with identifying a child as one with disabilities, or classifying that child, the type of classification they would get, whether it involves, well, if we think the child needs to be classified, there is a battery of evaluation, comprehensive evaluation process. Anything that involves that, or the results, or the interpretation of results, the recommendation for special education services. We may have disagreements around what kind of services are needed. We may also look at where the child is placed, which type of classroom, which kind of environment. Is there an environment that we think is better suited to the child's placement? Disciplinary actions with students with disabilities. We may have a serious concern that a youngster with a disability is being treated with disciplinary action just as any other student might be, and we feel that that disability, however, is a cause of the aberrant behavior, in that case, we really might want to quickly request mediation so that we can get the necessary procedures put in place to determine whether that is so. And then any other matters under federal and state law and regulations not subject to a due process request. And a very simple type of example might be the question of the relationship between a child and a faculty member or a person in the classroom or with other children. We may think a child is getting bullied. We want to get help on that. So if it's affecting a person with a disability, those other things, so many things that just affect the quality of life, can be brought up and resolved in a mediation, or at least procedures put in place to help to curb them. Now, a key thing that I want to mention that cannot be brought to mediation is a decision that's made by a subcommittee on special education level that results in a disagreement. It first has to go to the Committee on Special Education. And that committee, called the CSE, has to first attempt to resolve it before the request for mediation can be accepted. Another thing that cannot be addressed in mediation is awarding of legal attorney fees, even if it's in conjunction with other points of agreement. The other points of agreement may be able to be mediated, but nothing concerning the dollars to be paid for an attorney who represented either side is mediatable. What parents' failure to respond to requests for or refusal to consent to the initial provision of special ed mediation programs and services. You can't force a parent to respond. A parent also has the right to revoke a consent for receipt of special education services. And the parent's refusal to consent or give consent to an initial evaluation or reevaluation is not something that's mediatable. However, I will address the fact that a school district, even though a parent may not consent to an evaluation, does have the right to request an impartial hearing. The impartial hearing may provide for an evaluation. However, subsequent to that evaluation, even in that case, if a parent continues to not consent to special education services, the parent's decision rules. I want to stop a minute and ask on that part if there are any questions before we start dealing specifically with the mediation process.
Okay, Dr. Bernie, I'm just checking to see if we have anyone with any questions at this point. Okay, so far we don't have any questions, but remember at the end we'll open it up for questions as well as do a webcam with Dr. Bernie. So thank you.
All right, let's talk about this mediator that you would be working with. First of all, the mediator is going to have a pre-qualification to become a special education mediator. You first have to become a community mediator. And to do that, you have to complete a 30-hour community mediation training program that has been approved by the Office of Court of Administration. You have to complete a supervised apprenticeship within the local community dispute center for which you are going to be volunteering. And you have to receive ongoing professional development. Every mediator at every center is expected to complete ongoing professional development services, and that is usually in services offered by the community center, things offered by perhaps parent centers in the local area that have programs. And every year, NYSER has a professional development conference, and every mediator is invited clearly to participate in that annual conference. Special education mediators also are community mediators. You see, they have to first have gone through that first level standard and demonstrated competence by their community dispute center standard. So after they've gone through an apprenticeship, after they've done mediations and been observed in mediations, now these are people identified as competent mediators. Then they have the right to be recommended for a special ed mediator, to be a special ed mediator, and that time they would complete 16 hours of the New York State approved basic special education program. They would complete also a special education mediation apprenticeship, and they also would receive up to 6 hours professional development annually. So the folks are well trained, and they are not employees of any education agency, and they come from various professions and levels of education. So they are highly trained, and they have no vested interest in the outcome from a professional relationship. The role of the mediator in mediation is mainly to monitor Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. How far back did I look? Was the sound on? Well, I will start here with the role of the mediator. The mediator's role is to basically monitor the emotional climate in the room and exhibit non-judgmental impartial behaviors. The mediator constantly watches both parties, makes certain that each is in an emotional state to appropriately defend themselves, present their case in a rational, reasonable way. If the climate becomes too emotional for an individual, which often happens, is totally acceptable. The mediator will just simply call a halt to the mediation for a while, give people an opportunity to regain composure, or ask what they would like to do. Usually it's a short period, or we take a break as people come back to the table, and we're assured of the fact that everybody is in the best state to be able to mediate appropriately. The other thing is never to exhibit any kind of judgmental or impartial behavior. As it said, it's not about the mediator. It is about the parties sitting at the table, and it is about helping them to effectively communicate with each other. So the mediator basically facilitates the conversation, really tries to encourage and prompt people to provide explanations so that the underlying interest can be surfaced. To do this, they have to use a set of communication skills, and those communication skills often help people and inspire them to arrive at creative solutions. If successful, then an agreement is written up. And that agreement is written up in such a way that it is absolutely precise in its language it reflects exactly what the parties have agreed to and puts in the measures of accountability. Who is responsible for what? Before the document is signed, the parties, both the school district and the parent, have a chance to read over that agreement. As I said, it's not the mediator's agreement. The agreement belongs to the parties. So they have to approve every single word. They have to be satisfied that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and all questions that could be asked have been answered in that agreement. When that's done, then the agreement is signed. And what's important is that when it's signed, it becomes a legally binding document. And it also may include what to do if any element of that document is out of compliance. Who attends? Well, we know the parent and or legal guardian of the child or adult who is being discussed. An authorized decision maker from the school district, an absolute critical piece. There must be a school district decision maker in the room, someone who can make changes, for example, to an individualized education plan. Others that may be deemed appropriate who have information about what's happened in this case, such as a teacher, a counselor, or a school psychologist. There may be a service provider, somebody who's worked in another capacity with the person that it may be helpful in the mediation. A friend or family member may accompany the parent. The child, if appropriate. In fact, state ed now is encouraging that we include children, especially the older child, maybe from the age of 12 upward, because as we know, any agreements that are made pertaining to a preteen or teen has to be executed by that teen, and that it's helpful if they too can be a part of the decision-making process, and most importantly, that we're getting them to sign up to execute. Plus, it gives them a chance of feeling that they have some control over what happens to them. And then either side might choose to have an attorney or an advocate in the room to make certain that elements of the law particularly are being considered and aligned. And then interpreters. So if we have an individual who is not fluent in English, then the community centers that I keep referring to would be able to acquire an interpreter to be able to sit in the mediation with the parent. All participants, however, in the mediation must be agreed upon by the principals. So the parent or guardian and the district decision maker must be in agreement with all the people that are being identified to be in the mediation, and once everybody agrees that these people can be present, then they are allowed. Now, how does a parent request mediation? The parent writes a letter to the Committee on Special Education or the Board of Education. It's a very direct and simple process. Just state your name and your child's name. You state your contact information, your address, your phone number, if you have an email address, your cell phone. That's the easy way to get to you. You identify the student's date of birth, and then you describe briefly the problem. I have a problem that my child needs a consultant teacher to be with him during the day, and I've been promised, and it's not happened, as an example. A proposed solution would be, please update the IEP to include a consultant teacher. That's an example of how a request might be written. a problem might be stated, and a proposed solution given. Now, please take a look carefully. A sample of this request form can be found online at the address that is showing on the screen. I will say it slowly, and if you need to write it down, do so. www.p12.gov/special-ed/policy/mediation form, all one word, .htm. Now, this will be also available to you as a handout that I hope all of you have gotten, that wanted to get that down, have had a chance to do so. Or you can just contact your local Community Dispute Resolution Center. And you can find your local center by going to the New York State Dispute Resolution Association website, which is nysdra.org. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on Find a CDRC. There you can scroll through all of the list of the 20 community dispute dispute centers that are located across the state that serve all 62 New York State counties, and you can find the one that's closest to you. Here is a map that shows you how these centers are spread out across New York State. And so you can see that no matter where you're located, north, south, east, west, or central New York, there is a community dispute settlement center near you. And it is a center where you can receive special education mediation service. At that center, you will find a dispute resolution intake coordinator. And that person actually is the one who manages the scheduling and makes certain that the parent and school district are aligned and are able to attend that mediation within that window of 5 to 14 days. Sometimes it's even sooner. The parties meet with a qualified mediator. They have an opportunity to explain their view. Discussion takes place. Mutual agreements are documented and signed by principals of the mediation, the school district decision maker, the parent or the guardian, and the mediator. Summary of the process. So, the focus is on the best interest of the child. And that's a wonderful thing, because we know that as we enter the room, no matter what kind of conflict we're in, we have one thing in common. We both want to see the child get a chance at a fair and appropriate public education. The mediation generally lasts 2 to 3 hours. And for cases that go to mediation, here's good news. Those that go to mediation, agreement is reached 88% of the time. I think those are pretty good odds, folks. Worth giving it a chance. And if there is no agreement or only a partial agreement, there's always the opportunity to schedule another mediation session. And as I said, always remember, parents, that you always have the right to due process. So in the end, why mediate? Simple. It's a win-win. Thank you very much. This ends the presentation part of this webinar.
So thank you, Dr. Bernie, for all that information. That was very appreciative. And I just want to give us a moment to open it up if anyone has any questions. And if you do, then we'll switch over to webcam. So just give us a moment or two to see if anyone has any questions to ask or anything for Dr. Bernie. Okay, it looks like actually we don't have any questions today, and I think that's because it was a very informative webinar today. So at this time, as you know, you will, once you leave the webinar, you will get a link to our information, and within a week or two, this will be posted on our Starbridge website. So if you'd like to review it again, it will be out there. So thank you so much today for joining us.
Thank you all.